welcome to the Victoria Rumble Room, the little show with a big heart that covers all sorts of issues that cover Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada, the wide world. I'm Robin Adair, and speaking of big hearts, no one has a bigger heart than my co-host John Jurisic across town, the Croatian sensation.
Another extraordinary intro. Can't help thinking at the end of the year here about all the things that have happened, and one of them that really stroked my ego has been your introductions of me, and I really appreciate those because I feel a lot better, as though I need it. But man, another program today that's going to cover the good, the bad, the ugly. Speaking of ugly, an old-growth forest protester knocked down a person. That person happened to be the forest minister the other day. Disgusting behavior, unacceptable behavior, not permitted. Don't do it. Stop.
If you were anybody else, it wouldn't be acceptable. He knocked down a woman. He knocked down a woman in front of the legislature who happened to also be the forest minister. Somebody like that really needs to be arrested and face some consequences. It's so disgusting. And we also then, on the flip side, we had anti-vaxxers in front of the legislature with the effigies of the premier and other members of cabinet, and they had them on nooses, like they were hanging them. They were hanging them in effigy in front of the legislature. And what does this serve? The anti-vaxxers are upset because they say their civil rights are not being respected, that they shouldn't have to get vaccinations. And yes, they're right. They don't have to get vaccinations, but their civil rights under the charter are not being trampled on. If this was the case, you better believe lawyers have been in there and defended this and thrown this out long ago. So, the reality is we have people on the extreme left and the extreme right, both doing extremist things. And the message gets lost every time. A waste of time.
Robin, it's like anarchy's okay. That's not acceptable. I can think of more examples, people not considering the consequences of their actions. I know we can do a lot better. Government is taking a hard look at future old growth logging. Protesters need to chill out and see what's decided as we talk amongst the numerous communities that make one BC community. As for the anti-vaxxers, don't get me going. But however, it has to be said, it's a huge part of what this year has been all about. Omicron virus looks like it's going to hurt a lot of people. You don't get vaccinated, you're going to get sicker. You're going to make a lot of us get sicker. You're going to make other people sicker. You're going to make your family sicker. Are you getting my point, you anti-vaxxers? Do you have a right to say no to vaccinations? Of course you do, but don't impact the rest of us. Go stay in your room. Oh, man, the majority of us have a right to feel safe. Most people are following the rules, Robin. Hanging politicians in effigy only makes these anti-vaxxers look like a bunch of friggin' idiots.
Absolutely, John. Couldn't have said it better. And the interesting thing about that Omicron is that apparently it's much more contagious, but it may not be as dangerous. We may be turning a corner because of the mutations of the original virus. The thought is that we may be finally turning a corner. This is not the time to go over the top with protests. It's time for us to look forward to happier times. And speaking of that, business is doing well now as we move towards Christmas. And joining us to give us the full scoop on that is Jeff Bray from the DVBA. Let's zoom him in. And now, joining us in the Rumble Room, along with Jeff Bray from the Downtown Victoria Business Association, is once again Croatian Santa.
How do I keep showing up in these shows? Where is John? Okay, I got to get on. I've got a very busy time. Just hold on a second, please. Hold on.
See, that's the old John Jurisic I used to remember from the 70s. Oh, there he is.
Look, Robin, we have to stop the hacking of Santa Claus into our December shows. But I'm sure glad that we have Jeff Bray here today, because he's going to tell us a little bit about some of the exciting Christmas stuff going on in downtown Victoria, representing the Downtown Victoria Business Association. How is the business season going for businesses downtown, Jeff? Clearly, it's going good for Santa.
Well, obviously the last couple of years, as we've talked about before, have been certainly very challenging for hospitality, retail. It's been great. One of the great things about our region is how Greater Victorians really embraced shopping local and making those purposeful shopping decisions, whether it's downtown or their neighborhood store. We all recognize Jeff Bezos is doing just fine. And so people have been making those types of purchasing decisions. And this may well be one of the sort of silver linings that comes out of this, is that people have discovered great local retailers, great restaurants, great places to spend their discretionary dollars right here in town. So I can tell you that, even compared to last year, while we're still in this pandemic, businesses are busy, streets are busy, people are shopping, and restaurants are busy. I mean, the challenge really is staff, not customers. And that's terrific because, of course, a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses throughout the region, these are our friends, these are our family. They employ our friends and neighbors, our students. So seeing them doing well is great. It's something we're going to have to continue to focus on. There are still a few sectors that are really challenged, those that focus primarily on international tourism. Yes. Still going to be a real challenge. It's still a very, very difficult winter for them. But certainly with the announcement of cruise ships coming in the spring, there is a sense that maybe we are moving, into, a more of a regular economic pattern. But it's been really good this year. Obviously, not like 2018, not like 2019, but much, much better even than last year. And of course, what we're also seeing is other events that are coming back. So we've had the truck convoy, we've had the Santa Claus parade. We have our Lights of Wonder starting next Thursday in Centennial Square. Some of the things that people enjoy with their family and their friends that we haven't been able to do for a couple of years are coming back. And so I would also say there's a general sense of optimism and excitement that, I don't think was there last year. Mm-hmm. So that bodes well for citizens, for businesses, and for employees.
I think people want to celebrate something. People are so tired of being stuck inside and fearful of the pandemic. And I think people are relieved to get out there and see the lights and get out there. And it was pouring rain when they had that Christmas parade downtown, and people came out in droves for it. They were determined to celebrate.
Yes, it was great. And there was a poll done by Leger last month that indicated 80% of Canadian families intend to really get together this year and be less concerned about physical distancing and some of those things. Really that desire to sort of congregate and get together. And so places like Lights of Wonder, which are outdoors, there's no cost, there's no fences, there's no tickets, come as many times as you like, is just a great community spot for people to gather. And I think that's what's been missing for all of us for so long. And so there is that sense of optimism, and certainly, I continue to encourage people to shop local, downtown for sure, but nonetheless shop local. We've got so many great suppliers, restaurants, food producers, craft breweries, jewelry makers, retailers, that keeping those dollars in our local economy is really what's helped us, I think, come through this stronger than really almost any other region in North America.
Wow. That builds really into my next question. Don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but there's still a pandemic environment. There was the announcement, of course, of Omicron, the sense that the island is leading in COVID cases. But DVBA's job here, to some degree, is to work through that negativity and promote. You're telling us about it, but tell us some of the winter activities that you have organized, that are being organized, that are planned for the winter here.
Sure. Well, one of the main ones, of course, I mentioned is Lights of Wonder, which will run December 16th right through the 31st, including December 25th. So people can come down 4 till 9 o'clock or 4 till 10. We have lots of entertainment. Most of the entertainment are just community groups that we've opened up the space to. One of our choirs is actually persons living with dementia and their caregivers. We cover all the costs, we'll have heaters up for them, and it's really just a chance for the community to get together. We really want to welcome people downtown. It's a way in part for downtown businesses to say thank you to the region. And it's also hopefully an opportunity for people when they come down to tie in some shopping, tie in a drink, tie in a dinner, have a date night, bring the kids, go to the spaghetti factory, to also support those businesses that have been, working hard to just stay open through the last 18 months. We've got a few performances that will be happening at McPherson Theater. Restaurants are full. People are having small, Christmas parties, not the great grand ones necessarily, but a lot of that activity is happening. We're seeing it. Hotels are filling up for December. Families are feeling like, at least within Canada, that they can come and travel, visit with family. So, downtown's going to feel a lot more like it traditionally does, not 100% because we still are in a pandemic. The other thing I'd say is that what we've seen is in this region, Dr. Stanwyck has been so good at communicating locally that, restaurants and stores have really been able to implement any of the protocols they've needed to. So many people, the vast majority of people are double vaccinated. So there's also that great sense that businesses are doing what they need to do. We as a community have been doing what we need to do. So there is that sense that, yes, there are variants and people are keeping an eye on that, but people are feeling a lot more comfortable around each other than maybe even 4 or 5 months ago, notwithstanding Delta variant and Omicron or other things, because everyone's been doing the right thing. And I think we're very lucky in this part of the world. And I think Island Health has done a great job of keeping everybody informed with real information and also with how to keep everybody safe. So there is a very optimistic, very joyous kind of feeling out on the street. Really, we're looking forward to a great December. I know Boxing Week, which is often a traditional shopping area, is going to be really a lot of fun downtown. Lights of Wonder will be here. Hot chocolate will be at every coffee shop, and people can come and enjoy one of the best mid-sized downtowns in North America safely and comfortably.
And people can still say Merry Christmas, and we can say Merry Christmas to you, Jeff.
Well, thank you. Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for doing the podcast, because you don't shy away from controversial topics, but that's what we need. We need these kinds of conversations. And I'm glad this one is a positive one, and happy to come on anytime, you guys. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to your listeners.
Merry Christmas to you. Man, great to hear from Jeff Bray. Great to hear from the Downtown Victoria Business Association. Great to hear about downtown Victoria. It's kind of been ostensibly a bit of a morgue for the past 2 years. That's really unfortunate. Nobody wants to see that. I can tell you I'm doing everything I can to support local business. I really am. And I think everyone else should. They've had a tough couple of years, and we should try to do all we can to help them and their employees so that we can all have a little bit better Christmas than we've had over the last several years.
Absolutely, John. And I think that it's fun to explore also all the things that are being offered downtown, the lights, displays, all the different things that are happening. You can go down and enjoy it with your family and friends, because downtown Victoria is beautiful. And I think people are missing out if they don't get a chance to check all these things out. Mm-hmm. And we're going to change topics now slightly. Mm-hmm. Something else that's very positive. And, for these of a little gift for our friends in the cycling community, who I sometimes feel we're anti-cycling when you're a cyclist, and we both believe in cycling. We just also believe there's got to be balance. And we are pleased to see that the CRD and the municipalities have gotten together with the province, and they're going to increase the bike paths that go along the ENN, so the are biking all the way down to the Johnson Street Bridge, and I think this is all very positive. And the thing that occurred to us in this discussion was what happens to the ENN? What are the future plans for the rail? Has that all gone out the window? So we just had to ask the CRD chair, Colin Plant, if the push might be on still for a commuter rail from Langford.
We did look at longer opportunities, both the ENN as well as a West Shore ferry, looking at a ferry from Colwood to the Inner Harbor. But when it comes to the ENN, the CRD is somewhat agnostic as to what that corridor actually sees on it, as long as we see transportation. We want to see either train, bus, some hybrid model like that, but we don't want to see the corridor lost. And so while we are a member of the Island Corridor Foundation, because the land that the ENN goes through the Capital Regional District, the CRD, even though some of its mayors have lobbied for the province to immediately start rail, we are just wanting that corridor to be preserved. And if it's rail, great.
So the CRD sounds like it's interested in restoring a rail service. That's fascinating. I've been involved with this kind of so-called potential project for many years. As I was involved with Langford, there were discussions even back then, 15 years ago.
The question is, where's the money? Where's the money, eh?
Where's the money? Where's the cooperation? Where's the unity, as with almost all issues Lower Vancouver Island based? And so we've, topical. I mean, this really changes the way we do everything if there was a new transportation corridor. So we've reached out to Larry Stevenson, the CEO of the Island Corridor Foundation. They're responsible for 290 kilometers of track. Most of the old ENN line has been shut down since 2011, right? I mean, can they bring back passenger or freight services? I'd really like to know. A lot of people would like to know. Let's zoom in, our local rail expert.
And now joining us in the Victoria Rumble Room is Larry Stevenson, all the way from Duncan. Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, Larry, we just had a quick comment from Colin Plant, who's the chair of the CRD. He talked about some of the areas that the CRD would like to advocate for in the future. They don't have the money necessarily, but they have, the interest. They'd like to see, of course, a ferry that would run between Colwood and Victoria, a commuter ferry. But he also said they would really welcome the idea of a commuter rail from Langford to Victoria. We've heard of that before. Does it help that the CRD is interested in this?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the CRD has long been a supporter of rail for us, and we certainly appreciate every effort they make. And if you go back a couple of years, you'll find that the 12 mayors from the CRD actually wrote a letter to the province in support of rail as a key piece of infrastructure for the island. So yeah, we very much appreciate their support. And yes, it does help a lot.
Larry, thanks for joining us, by the way. Great to meet you. One of the reasons we thought about the Island Corridor Foundation was the recent atmospheric rivers, that used to be called really, really bad storms, nonetheless, that shut down the Malahat and created grocery shortages and gas lineups. However, I understand besides one small slide, the rail bed wasn't damaged by the storm. How difficult and expensive would it be to have freight trains back online between Nanaimo and Victoria?
Well, I mean, the province has undergone a pretty comprehensive assessment, I'm sure you're aware. And, that assessment, when they put it out, unfortunately, it was a little bit muddied, and it was muddied by a couple of different factors. But, we've gone through the assessment. We think that rail can be restored to the island for probably $350 to $400 million, which is a lot of money. I mean, there's no question it's a lot of money, but you're going to have that alternative. You mentioned the atmospheric rivers. We did come out of that okay. And yeah, we only had a small slide. It took us about 4 hours to clean it up. You could say we were lucky. I mean, we've seen what happened on the mainland. But yes, we did come out of it. I mean, that railroad's been there for 135 years. It's very solid. And, we were very fortunate that we didn't realize any major damage.
I think about the expense of doing this. I had the privilege during the Olympic year that we just had in Vancouver. It seems like it just happened.
Yeah, right.
It's been a while now, but the Olympic year in Vancouver, I was there, and there was a a rail that was set up between Olympic Village and it went all the way to Granville Island. It was set up as a sort of a test piece, and it ran so efficiently. And they had the rail bed there, and they ran it back and forth, and it got lots of usage because there were so many people taking in the Olympic Games. I think it was Bombardier that supplied the train. It was made in Europe, or I can't remember all the logistics. Yeah. But it didn't stay because the city of Vancouver said, we don't have the money for it. And they just didn't have any backing for it. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that's been the biggest problem. All these ideas about having a commuter train. I mean, it hurts that they took out the rail access across the new Johnson Street Bridge, but that shouldn't be the game changer because you can still walk across the bridge or you can have buses. So it seems to me, though, we're back to dollars and cents. They had a train for the Olympics. They didn't keep it. They've talked about a train, even a commuter rail that wouldn't run all the time, but would run in high peak periods. And there just doesn't seem to be the interest because of the money. Is that going to be the biggest hurdle? And where's that money coming from?
Well, certainly the money's a big issue. You know, when we talk about $350 or $400 million, that's taxpayer money, and that's important. And, you know, we're certainly cognizant of that. However, in the scheme of things, when you look at transportation projects, generally speaking, it's actually relatively inexpensive. You know, if you look at the mainland today, you know, they're going to spend $350 million to go 1 kilometer on the mainland. We're talking about $350 million that does the entire island here. And, you know, with that $350 million, you're going to get a small commuter system in the Langford corridor. You're going to get interregional trains that are going to operate all the way to Courtenay. You're going to get freight trains that go to Port Alberni, and you're going to get excursion trains that are going to operate for the tourist seasons. So, you know, it's relatively inexpensive. And for whatever reason, rail always attracts that question. And, you know, my counter to that is, are we asking the same question about the highway? And are we asking the same question about the ferry? And are we asking the same question about the bus? For everybody always wants to point to rail and say, well, it's got to pay for itself. We actually think this has a good chance of paying for itself. But it's an interesting dynamic when you ever get into these conversations. You know, it's the money. It's always the money.
So, you know, one of the sort of components of that dialogue is around the demand side, right? Mm-hmm. And really, is there enough demand to justify? Certainly, recent climate-related activity has clearly pointed out that there would be demand. But so from your point of view, is there enough from both industry and tourism to justify the expense?
I do think there's enough, and I wouldn't put it on tourism, but I would certainly put it on industry. You know, we've got a port sitting up in the port of Port Alberni that's absolutely underutilized. There's nothing going through that port, yet we've got ships parked all over this island because they can't get into Vancouver and Seattle. You know, and there's an outlet for that, and it's not necessarily reliant upon stuff that's manufactured on this island or even consumed on this island. We can use Port Alberni as a bridge to take stuff over to the mainland and get it connected to the other class ones. So there's that piece of it. But there's also the social justice issue that comes, I think, into play when you start talking about passenger service on this island. You know, you'll recall when Wilson's was having their difficulty during the pandemic, you know, there's a group of people that are serving 31 First Nations that all of a sudden dropped out of the race, and we left those people standing. And we have a similar issue here on the island. We don't have a lot of options for people. You know, there's talk now about, well, we'll run a bus from Nanaimo to Victoria. I'm not sure about you, but 2.5 hours on a city bus that has no facilities, that just not something I think I really want to do. You know, then when you introduce into that discussion that over the Malahat by 2038, you know, they're saying it's going to take 2.5 hours to get from Mill Bay into Victoria. You know, we need to find a different way to do things. And, you know, I know that Colin had mentioned the ferry. You know, I've long advocated for, we need to take a more holistic approach to transportation. And you know what, if a ferry works, you know, if Rob Martin's ferry works, it works. We should be doing that. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking at it. You know, and we need to start talking about the integration of all these services to provide the best service we can for the people of the island.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned First Nations, and I know you have First Nations on your board, and I know you've been in court with some of the First Nations who are unhappy about maybe not getting their fair share of the land. Of course, the land was appropriated in the 1800s by the federal government to give to Robert Dunsmuir and his crew so they could build the ENN for his coal business. And it's really been a First Nations problem, I guess, for the First Nations for a long time. But I understand now there's even a chance, maybe you could tell me how big a chance, that the First Nations might take over operation or ownership of the ENN.
Well, certainly that's an idea that I've been talking about, because, you know, one of the things our nations are saying to us is, look, you want to continue to run this railroad, you need to be able to show us that there's something in this for us. And it's got to be something beyond, you know, a laborer's job. So, you know, we're starting to talk about the idea of, well, why don't we just turn it over to the First Nations to operate it? They can own and operate a railroad. They do it successfully in northern Quebec. I mean, it's a much different service, but there's no reason why we couldn't do that here on the island. You know, and it certainly would put that value back in the hands of the First Nations, you know, in the interest of our First Nations partners. And it makes everybody kind of happy, because the regional districts, who are the other side of that partnership, are also happy because they're getting their needs met through the transportation system. So yeah, I'm real big on that idea, and it's one that I hope we progress further down the line as we go through this conversation.
So I have a final question for you. I suspect that being around and in the spirit of the holiday season here, you know, as we're chatting with you, well, I think it goes without saying that senior government's going to be hard pressed to come up for you, for all of us, with 350 mil to replace the entire rail bed. But maybe it could be done in sections. Yeah. So if you had if you were to ask for Christmas presents from the feds, what would you be realistically asking for if we were doing this in bits and pieces?
Well, I think when you say, what am I going to be asking for, I think that's already been determined. You know, the appeals court, you know, you mentioned the lawsuits that we have with the First Nations. The appeals court's been pretty clear. You know, they've come out and said that the federal government must, within 18 months, determine if this rail line is in the public interest, and if so, if they're going to fund it. So, you know, the question has been asked, and, you know, certainly we are putting out the word to the federal government that needs to be an answer to that question, because literally, I think the future of this corridor depends on it. So what do I want for Christmas? You know, I think we need an affirmative answer or affirmative response from the federal government that they're willing to support it. We need to sit down and start that discussion, because just because the federal government says they're going to do it, we still need the provincial government to get involved. There's a lot of work to be done. You know, just, you know, we talked a minute about having a First Nations organization own and operate it. We need to have that conversation as well. You know, we've got a lot to do. And, you know, you mentioned doing it in pieces. Can we do it in pieces? Well, we're going to have to do it in pieces anyway. But I think the federal government would tell you, if you're going to do it, do it. Do the whole thing. Get this stuff out of the way. Take care of the issues with reconciliation, and let's move forward.
And just quickly, what would it cost to put a commuter rail between Langford and Victoria? If they said, we're going to do it in bits, we're going to take the area that you figure you can get the most traffic on first. I mean, realistically, what would it cost to get a train? Because I guess you'd have to get a new train for it as well, would you?
Yeah.
And get those tracks up to spec where you can run a commuter rail.
Well, to be clear, we're not talking about the dayliner here. So yes, we do need to get new equipment. That's going to have to be built into the whole model. I haven't actually broke it out segment by segment by segment, although I know we do have that information. But I'm guessing, and it would only be a guess, it's probably $75 million, you know, to $100 million off the top of my head. You have to remember, we have an existing rail bed here. All we're doing really is upgrading it. So it's, you know, it's not that expensive to do, and it wouldn't take very long to do it.
Great to hear from Larry Stevenson. We'll keep a close eye on this issue. I mean, it would be amazing to see even the commuter rail brought back, let alone more train service. And, you know, with the Malahat shut down for that period of time, it would have been nice to be able to move some freight along that rail line. So, you know, these are all things that have to be thought through. Is there money? Where's the money? That's the big question. And I guess we'll learn more as this all evolves. I want to mention we've been publicizing that the mayor of Saanich, Fred Haynes, was going to be on the show, and we will take the hit on this. There was a scheduling problem. Fred was great about it. And so we're going to be bringing Fred on in early January. For those who were sitting around the screen saying, I wanted to see Fred Haynes, you will see Fred soon. And we want to wish Fred and his family a very Merry Christmas. And John, I think we're almost ready to wrap this show up. Maybe you could just quickly again talk about how people can follow this show, like this show, become part of the Rumble Room experience.
Absolutely. You know, another thing, as we're making these shows near the end of the year, I mean, it doesn't matter that we can somewhat date it. It's been a difficult couple of years, and this has been particularly fun for me with you. But what I've noticed as I edit is I'm becoming physically more demonstrative, you know, and just really, it's almost like a workout.
Well, I've got a person that I know quite well that is a huge fan of your hand movement.
You know, just like, and I even watch myself as we're recording. It's like, what is he doing? So in the spirit of this, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, and follow us on TikTok. And isn't that a little rim? You know, I got to make that into a bit of a rhyme, I think. So I'm going to song and sell it with all my physical fitness with John Jurisic in the Victoria Rumble Room. However, I remain as always the king of Lower Tulip Avenue, Johnny Jurisic.
And I'm Robin Adair, and Rumble on.